Hello. So welcome to my talk about OpenAPI. So why you want to use OpenAPI for your REST API? What's the OpenAPI spec? Who has heard of OpenAPI or Swagger already? Okay, great. Yeah, formerly known as Swagger, and the company maintaining Swagger donated the spec to the OpenAPI initiative. And you describe your API with JSON or a YAML document. And this document can be used for documentation, for generating routes for your web framework, and for providing an interface for manually testing API calls in a GUI, for example. And the input and output is specified with a JSON schema. So this is just a very short example how a Swagger file looks like. So you define the endpoints and the HTTP methods. You specify an operation ID. This is for the framework you are implementing it in. And the parameters, query parameters, or parameters which are in the path or in the body. And you can specify the responses along with the schema of the response. So why not use Ramen or Blueprint or something like that? I didn't say you shouldn't do that. It's just, it seems like OpenAPI or Swagger is really, they did it right. So many companies are in the OpenAPI initiative. But you also can try out Ramen or Blueprint or any others. And because the specification serves several purposes, the documentation is likely less to get out of date because you have everything in one file. So you have the specification and you add the descriptions, and you need to write less code because you can use a framework that generates your endpoints. And just a short note about Ramen. It looks pretty similar to OpenAPI. It also uses JSON schema. And some differences, you can specify traits which can be applied to several endpoints, so you don't have to repeat yourself. But if you're using YAML, you can also use YAML aliases for that. And you can define different output schemas per content type. This is not possible with OpenAPI. So if you need that, you might want to look at Ramen.
Excuse me, could you elaborate on that?
On the different output schemas, or can show you. So here you have two content types, application JSON and application XML, and you could define a schema for each of them. So there's Mojolicious plugin OpenAPI. It's written by Jan-Henning Thorsen, and he also wrote the Swagger and JSON validator modules. And it's ready to use, I think. And this was actually the base for our port to Dancer 2. So Dancer 2 plugin Swagger 2. It's probably about to be renamed to OpenAPI. And it uses Swagger and JSON validator. And the first version was written by Daniel Böhmer during his work at Strato AG. And we will further support this development of this module. And you can use it already to play around. So there are a couple of things that still need to be implemented, but you can use it for the basic things. But yeah, expect there will be changes. So I wrote a little example. It's a Git repository, and you can actually browse through the several commits to see how to change a simple dancer API without documentation and anything to use this plugin. Just clone it and go through the commits. It generates the dancer roots for you, and before delegating to your method, it validates the input, and the return data structure is validated. And there's a Swagger UI front end where you can see all the endpoints and fill out parameters and try out what you get back. So this is the example repository. So it's an API for a restaurant. So the restaurant has a menu. And I think I'll show you the OpenAPI file first. So here you have the menu call. It's pretty simple. And you can give a category in the query. And you can specify an enum for the category. And the response is menu item short. And below you have the definitions. Sorry. So here you have menu item short and menu item. You specify type object and the properties for the object, ID, name, and category. And the full menu item has also a description and a price. So that's the final version. This is the first version without any OpenAPI. Simple API in Dancer 2. Yeah, and you can see in the history, so I added the OpenAPI specification, and in the next commit I added the Swagger UI front end. So now I started the server. So this is the Swagger UI front end. And because you specified an enum, you can select the category and simply try it out. And this is what you get back. If you have several content types, you also can select this here. And this call is for getting a single item. So it has an ID for the item, and this is in the path. But there are some things you should be aware of. So for example, if you are using MySQL or Sybase, you will actually get back strings. I think in Postgres you get actually integers back if you have integers in the database. And the problem is that you specified an integer in the OpenAPI file, and the validator will complain about that. So if you're using DBIX class, you can actually use this helper class, row_numify_get. If you're not using DBIX class, you have to do that manually, so be aware of that. And it's also important if you have null values, this will, the validator will also complain about that. So you specified a string in the OpenAPI file, and it gets a null value, and it says that's not valid. You could add the null value to the specification too, but I think that's not really the right thing. So if you have no value for that, you should just leave it out. So this is also very important. Additional properties false. This you should add this to your JSON schema, because by default this case JSON schema will allow any additional values to your objects. And so if you make a mistake in your implementation and you put in maybe your DBIX class result row or something like that in the results, and then the user will see that along with the database password probably and stuff like that. So remember to use that always. Yeah, this is how it looks like. How much time do I have left? Oh, 45 seconds. So, yeah, so just browse through the repository, and I added comments to every commit, so you can actually see what I did and what calls you should try out to see what's happening. And we expect to work on the Dancer plugin in October. So Daniel Böhme will get back to Strato and work on that module. But if you want something that's really ready to use, then you use the Mojolicious plugin, if you use Mojolicious. Okay, so any questions?
JavaScript support in the browser for JavaScript,
I just know the Swagger UI front end. I don't know if there's anything else. So yeah, the Swagger UI front end is simply JavaScript. Yeah, you can specify OAuth in the Swagger file actually. But the plugins do not use this. So if you want to use OAuth yourself, you have to use that in your controller and implement it yourself. But the Swagger UI frontend also supports OAuth. So, yeah, it's still a bit problematic. But
You can use HTTP also.
HTTP what?
HTTP also. The good one.
Yeah.
So the API blueprint has a tool called Thread that tests your documentation against the implementation. Does OpenAPI have anything similar?
I don't know exactly how that looks like, what Blueprint does. So I don't know if there's something similar. Sorry. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much.